I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02. Can we have a roll call, please?
Marcus, do you have all the sheets to handle that?
Yep, let me pull them up.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Dustin Allred,
Here.
Jane Bilbin, Andrew Fell,
Here.
Lou Hopkins,
Here.
Deb McFarland,
Present.
Karen Sims, Jonah Weiskopf, and Chen-Shi Yu.
All right, so it looks like we have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I've got a question. We have a quorum because we need a majority of the appointed members? Quorum used to be 5. I'm curious why it's now 4.
Yeah, maybe I'm counting wrong, but do we have 8 members now?
No,
We have 7.
we still have a vacancy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 members.
Yeah. So good question, Lou. I don't think that 4 actually is. Let me pull up our.
I don't want to make life difficult, but it would be inconvenient to go through a meeting and have somebody challenge the entire process.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
no,
it would
good
be.
point.
Oh, I'm looking at the bylaws here. I'm finding quorum in here several places. I'm just not here seeing where it says what a quorum is. You go to the old zoning ordinance.
I found in the zoning ordinance, a quorum shall consist of a majority of the plan commission members then holding office.
Yeah, so I guess 4 out of 8 is not a majority.
Kevin?
Yeah.
Did we have a final determination on Mr. Weiskopf?
No, I have not been able to get a hold of him.
Okay.
Yeah, Jonah had expressed interest in resigning from at least one of the boards or commissions he's on, but I was not clear which one.
Okay, so should we try and get in touch with Miss Yu or?
Yes. So give me just a minute.
Sure. She's there. Kevin.
Yes.
He's here.
Good.
She's
Good. All right.
Problem solved.
Okay.
So
Chen-Shi, thank you for joining us. Can you just affirm that that is you that's here so we can declare quorum?
Yeah,
It's me. Sorry for late.
Oh, no, that's great. I think we're all very happy to see you. So thank you.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so we can proceed. We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
All right. Approval of the minutes from the March 10th, 2022 Plan Commission regular meeting. Are there any motions or comments on the minutes from the last meeting?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Hopkins. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Fell. Any discussion on the minutes? Any changes? All right. If not, we'll do a voice vote.
Andrew Fell,
Yes.
Lou Hopkins,
Yes.
Deb McFarland,
Yes.
Chen-Chi Yu.
Yes.
And me.
Sorry, Dustin Allred.
Yes.
That's what happens when you're at the top of the list and I stop at the bottom of the list.
No
Thank you.
problem. Okay, that passes. Do we have any communications?
I don't believe so.
I didn't receive anything on my case.
Okay.
And I had no communications on my case.
And I also had no communications. So no communications.
All right. Continued public hearings. Plan case number 2425T21, a request by the Urbana Zoning Administrator to amend the Urbana Zoning Ordinance with changes to Article 2, definitions, Article 5, use regulations, and Article 6, development regulations, and other relevant sections to facilitate solar energy system installation. This case is continued to the April 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the Plan Commission. Plan case number 2438T22, an application by the Urbana Zoning Administrator to amend the Urbana Zoning Ordinance to allow for limited residential, commercial, and public uses in existing buildings in the R7 University Residential Zoning District. Case continued to the April 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the Plan Commission. And case number 2442T22, an application by the Urbana Zoning Administrator to amend the Urbana Zoning Ordinance to require applicants for the planned unit developments to hold a neighborhood meeting prior to consideration at Plan Committee. This is our case continued from the last meeting. And do we have a presentation on this one?
We do. Yeah, I just want to wanted to give an update. So I sent out a pretty brief supplemental memo, and which had some additional strike through and language changes to it. So I'll pull that up here in a minute. But yeah, just to excuse me, to address some of the comments from the Plan Commission at our last meeting. So specifically, we added language to require that the applicants work with planning staff on all three phases of sort of setting up this neighborhood meeting. It now requires the applicant to send notification to a larger area than just the 300 feet that we had proposed previously. We're saying 800 feet, but we can have some discussion about what makes the most sense there. We added minimum requirements for the meeting, so sharing plans and other relevant information, and then also talking about waivers and public benefits that the project would provide. And then we added that one little, I changed the language to make it a little more straightforward, and then also add the proximity conditions phrasing that Mr. Allred suggested. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here so everybody can see what I'm talking about. So you all can see this, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So so that first change, so right here, we just added the applicant shall work with the planning staff to do the following. And again, we added that they would send notice to, and this is another thing we can discuss. So we're trying to be more inclusive and get more people involved, because currently for our for notification requirements, we just have to send notification to property owners. But of course, not everybody who lives in the neighborhood is a property owner. So we were thinking, if somebody is a renter or if somebody owns a business nearby, perhaps they should be notified. So we can discuss that. So that's why this says send notice to all addresses and property owners within 800 feet. So that will include renters, owners, business owners, etc. And then this new section here, which says that the applicant will provide plans, renderings, and other relevant information. That's kind of not terribly specific, but at least saying they need to share some stuff. And then again, waivers that they're requesting, and then public benefits. And let's see. Just rephrase this piece here to be more straightforward. That says if you hold a meeting before submitting the application, it will have fulfilled this requirement if you do all the things that we just laid out above. And then finally, this bit down here, it's just more straightforward. It's saying the applicant shall hold a neighborhood meeting if the proximity conditions of the above section are met. So I will open this up for questions first and then discussion after that.
Any questions for staff, Mr. Garcia? I can't see it.
Let me stop. Let me stop sharing.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay. Any questions for staff? So do we had public hearing or public comment last time? Well, there was none, but do we do that again with a continued case? What's the rule for that? Do you know?
I think it's always fine if if we're entertaining public comment. I don't actually see any members of the public here unless, oh wait, we do have attendees. Sorry, maybe I need to look at that. So I'm fine with opening it up for public comment.
Okay.
This was brought forth by me. So even if by the book we're not supposed to allow it, I'd still be okay with it.
All but two of the audience are members of my class, and one is the county zoning administrator. So we'll see. Okay, so does anyone in the audience want to address the commission about the proposed amendment? If you could raise your hand. All right. So I'm going to assume that we're not going to have any public comment on this one. Okay, so let's go into discussion and then possibly entertain a motion to vote on the amendment. So is there any discussion of the proposal?
Question, I guess. Almost all the time when we do a plan unit development, we do a preliminary or final together. If that doesn't happen, this kind of leads me to believe if these meetings are far enough apart, before you do the final review, you have to have another public meeting. Would that be true?
Yeah, and the reasoning behind that is that the preliminary and the final have different requirements. So If you have a public meeting that's just for the preliminary PUD, you're sort of sketching out your general plan for the PUD, but you're not getting into the specifics like you would in a final PUD. So, I think if you're spreading it out, it makes sense to have neighborhood meetings in both phases.
I can appreciate that, but to me, a little bit sometimes on the other side of it, if there's a public meeting and the design professional is responding to that public meeting and redesigning something in response to that, that might not happen within the time period to do this. And all that has been done is trying to respond to the comments in the public meeting. I'm not sure, it seems sort of redundant to have another public meeting in that case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, but I don't know. Like, this wouldn't, this wouldn't preclude you from making changes between the neighborhood meeting and when you brought something to Plan Commission and then council for either the preliminary or the final PUD. Like, I don't see, if you're just having a meeting about the preliminary PUD and people make comments about that and you make changes to your plans, then you'd go ahead and bring those to Plan Commission and then go through the whole process to get that approved. And then later, if you're coming back for the final, you'd hold another neighborhood meeting. And then if you had to respond to comments from that, then you'd go through the process again. I don't see how, say, comments that are affecting the preliminary PUD are going to make any difference to what the final looks like if you were already planning on doing the final at a much later time.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Any other comments from commissioners for discussion? Mr. Hopkins?
So just to clarify, there's nothing in here, either explicit or implicit, that discourages somebody from doing the preliminary and final at the same time.
No, and that's why.
And I'm partly looking at Andrew and saying, as somebody who does this, whether he perceives that there, given the question he asked.
Well, I can respond to the reality of the way my firm performs this is we are always going to present these together. There's no point in doing a preliminary and waiting any length of time to do a final.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if the other reality is if we present them both together and there are objections or other changes that need to be made, the case will just be continued while we make those changes.
And my recollection is that in recent years, which for me is longer than for most of you, all of the ones we've gotten have been simultaneous. So, okay, I think my question is answered.
Yeah, and I think I just want to add a little bit to that. So I think the PUD section of the ordinance, the way it's written, I think it's mostly contemplating sort of larger developments, maybe on the edges of town where there really is nothing. And we've been seeing pretty much every PUD we've been seeing since I've been on staff for the last 8 years has been it's been in town. So it's been sort of on the smaller end of PUDs, but something like, the exception to that is Clark Lindsay has come through with some final PUDs, and that's because they did have a preliminary PUD that covered a big swath of land. So now as they've been developing over the years, they'll come in with the finals. So I think that's sort of the process that, that makes sense as it's laid out in the ordinance. But for the in-town smaller stuff, yeah, like Andrew said, it's always going to be together.
And for the other kind, it makes sense that they're separate, and they're separate enough in time that the two meetings make sense. And trying to remember whether Menards did one 20 years ago, but it would have been a preliminary.
Any other comments for discussion? My only comment is, and I know I suggested this in the last meeting, to add the language about proximity conditions, which I like, but saying that they're triggered when the conditions are met, I don't know. The language seems a little odd to me, but I don't know if everyone else is fine with the way that would be understood. That saying that when something is met from the previous one, it just seems it's not very intuitive to me about what's going on there. And I think your explanation before was that you didn't want to add repetitive language, which would be one way to make it more clear. But that's
Yeah.
my only hang up that is still sort of.
Well, would it make, I'm not sure if I totally get your hang up, would it make sense if we said apply instead of are met? Because I feel like are met sounds kind of weird too, but.
So the applicant shall hold a neighborhood meeting if the proximity conditions of section apply. Yeah, I mean, to me, that sounds better in terms of how you would understand it. I don't know if anyone else has comment on that.
Yeah, can you explain again what you're talking about, please?
Here, I'll share my screen so I can point out exactly what we're talking about. So it's this sentence here at the bottom. So, I mean, basically, we're just trying to say for a final planned unit development, you also need to hold a neighborhood meeting. If you're doing the two together, of course, there's no problem. But if you're coming back for a final much later on, then you need to do the meeting. And we didn't want to repeat every single thing that we added to the above section.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, the are met portion of that, it just sounds like they've satisfied something, which is not the case.
Yeah. I agree, and I think apply would work better. And if that satisfies you, Dustin, I'm fine making that change.
That reads better to me.
Me also.
Okay. Any other comments, discussion? Are we ready to make a motion? I can't. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we send plan case 2442T22 to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
With the edit as we discussed, or?
Yes, with the edit of apply, replacing are met.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Hopkins. We have a second.
I'll second.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Fell. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Lou Hopkins,
Yes.
Deb McFarland,
Yes.
Shen-Chi Yu,
Yes.
Dustin Allred,
Yes.
and Andrew Fell.
Yes.
All right, that passes.
Yeah, that will go to council on April 11th.
All right, that takes us to old business. I don't see any old business. So moving on to new public hearings. We have plan case number 2443 SU 22, a request by Vital Skin Dermatology for a special use permit to expand a medical clinic in the existing building at 1111 West Kenyon Road in the B3 General Business Zoning District.
Before Nick gets started, Nick, is this your first plan commission meeting?
It is.
Well, then may I introduce you to the plan commission?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, so Nick is our newest planner. He joined us, back in January, I guess. And he's really been fitting in nicely, learning the ropes. And yeah, we're really excited to be back at full staff and with such a great planner on board. So here he is to present to Plan Commission for the first time.
All right, welcome, Mr. Olson.
Thanks, Kevin. Happy to be here with all of you. Share my screen here. Okay, can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a request by Vital Skin Dermatology to allow the expansion of a dermatology clinic at their property at 1111 West Kenyon Road in the B3 General Business Zoning District. In 2020, Vital Skin received a special use permit to operate a dermatology clinic in 6,000 square feet of the approximately 40,000 square foot building at the location. They're now requesting to expand clinic and testing space within the building by up to 7,900 square feet for a total of 13,900 square feet. The additional space would be treated as hospital or clinic space as defined by the zoning ordinance, which requires a special use permit in the B3 district. These spaces would be converted from what's currently storage space in the building and would not expand the building footprint or alter the exterior. Staff finds that the case meets the criteria for a special use permit and recommends that the Plan Commission approve the request conditional on general conformance with the submitted site plan. Here's a location map of the...
Mr. Olson,
Sorry?
can I interrupt for a second? Not a big
Go
deal,
ahead.
but you're showing it in presenter view, which is just making the images a little bit smaller for all of us. If you want to switch out of that.
Sure, let me fix this. How's that?
There you go. Much better. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. So here's the location map. The parcel is about 9.5 acres. It lies on the south side of West Kenyon Road between North Lincoln Avenue and Federal Drive. The north half of the parcel is the site of the building and parking facilities, and the south half of the parcel is currently undeveloped. The property's been the site of Vital Skin and its dermatology clinic and related offices and storage since 2020. Most recently, it was previously used as book, periodical publishing, storage, and distribution. Other nearby uses include Campus Inc. and Peoria Motor Coach to the west, Holiday Inn and Radisson Hotels to the east, and 1 Illinois North Apartments to the south. The property is zoned B3 general business, as are adjacent properties to the east. Adjacent properties to the west are zoned IN1 light industrial, and adjacent properties to the south are zoned R4 multifamily residential. Property to the north is interstate highway. A quick note on the 2005 comprehensive plan land use designation. Back then, the property was designated as a light industrial future land use. As you can see, it's kind of situated on the border of a light industrial area with a regional business area to the east. And as I mentioned, it was previously used as a bookbinding facility, so a bit more in line with the light industrial use. I looked at the meeting minutes from the initial 2020 special use permit case, and it seems like, at least as far as the 2005 future land use designation is concerned, a clinic use in the space didn't present any significant concerns at the time, but we can of course discuss more today. So this is a site plan submitted by the applicant, which allocates the conversion of up to 7,900 square feet of what's currently storage space to future clinic and testing space. Areas highlighted in yellow here would be the locations potentially undergoing renovation. The 2 highlighted rooms on the southeast edge of the building, totaling 3,600 square feet, would be the site of proposed testing facilities associated with the dermatology clinic. These testing facilities would be VitalSkin's first priority for any renovations and would be undertaken as soon as possible if granted the special use permit. In addition to these rooms, however, VitalSkin is also requesting permission to use up to 4,300 square feet for potential additional clinic space in the next 5 years. This would be in the highlighted areas in the middle of the building's southern half. There's some uncertainty about whether clinic space will actually expand there, but depending on if business needs lead them to, they'd like to ask for permission now to save going through the special use permit process again later. In the meantime, it's more likely the spaces will be used as continued storage or office space, both of which are permitted by right in the B3 district. Any of the discussed renovations would comply with zoning regulations in the B3 district and would not expand the building footprint or alter the exterior. More parking would eventually be required if all the additional space is converted, but not if they end up just doing the testing facilities. So a quick note on parking. The property currently has 116 parking spaces, which is more than the 100 currently required, which provides them with a bit of a cushion as they convert storage space to other uses. More parking would eventually be required if more than 4,025 square feet of storage space is converted to clinic or testing space. So if all the space is eventually converted, 12 additional spaces would be required. At that point, they would either have the option of adding more parking or applying for a variance. My understanding is that many employees currently work remotely. This picture was taken midday during a weekday, and parking is perhaps currently being underutilized, but we would cross the variance application bridge if and when we got there. And again, it's uncertain if they'll actually end up adding more than just the testing facilities, but they would like to have the option if their business demand calls for it. So to summarize staff findings, we found that the application meets requirements for this requested special use permit. We find that the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at this location due to the proximity to the interstate highway and to mass transit, which would be convenient for employees and patients, and the addition of testing facilities with the clinic should improve services for patients. The proposed use would not be injurious or detrimental to the B3 zoning district or injurious to the general public, as it would not negatively affect nearby uses or traffic patterns or generate excessive noise. It would also not require substantially more parking or any additional infrastructure or services. And finally, the proposed dermatology clinic would conform to the regulations and standards of and preserve the essential character of the B3 zoning district, as the building footprint and exterior will be unchanged. So Plan Commission has the following options with regards to Plan Case 2443 SU22. You may recommend approval of the special use permit without any conditions. You may recommend approval of the special use permit with any conditions deemed appropriate or necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, and to carry out the purposes of the city's municipal code. You may recommend denial of the special use permit. If Plan Commission elects to do so, it should articulate the findings supporting its denial. Based on the evidence presented, staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommend approval of the proposed special use permit in Plan Case number 2443 SU22, with the condition that construction of additional clinic or testing space must be in general conformance with the attached site plan, which allocates up to 7,900 additional square footage to clinic and testing space. I believe the applicant or a representative were planning on attending. If there are questions directly for them, someone might be here. Otherwise, I can take questions for staff. Thank you.
Dustin, I can't tell if you were talking, but you were muted. I saw your mask moving slightly.
Thanks. Sorry. Forgot I had muted. Okay. Are there any questions for staff?
Bob Kapelnick for Vital Skin Development has his hand raised.
Hi,
Okay.
I'm Bob Kapelnick. I'm the architect. I just wanted to clarify something in terms of what the lab actually is. They're not going to be bringing patients back there. It's basically a lab. With what they will be doing is taking tissue samples and putting them on slides, and then and they'll be bringing these in from some of their other facilities in the area, and then having a qualified doctor read the slides. So patients won't be going back there. It's basically just a processing lab to make slides up. The future expansion that we were looking at, and I talked to Nick about this earlier in the week, really would be office space, which I think by rights we'd be able to do anyway in that warehouse. But Marcus had recommended that we might want to add on a little bit of square footage now just in case, so that we don't have to come back in the future. I don't believe they will be expanding the clinic space, however, in terms of where the patients are coming in. And I don't know that what I'm saying really matters much as it relates to the lab. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on and what exactly they're going to be using that space for.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And Nick's doing a great job, by the way. I didn't realize he was new, so.
That
Thanks,
speaks
Bob.
well of him.
Yeah, that's a mark of approval there. Thanks, Bob.
So any questions for staff or for Bob, for the applicant's representative? Okay, so we'll go into the public hearing portion and give anyone in the audience a chance to address the commission about the project. When I look through the participants again, I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to address the commission about this proposal? All right, so we will close the public input portion and go into discussion and possibly entertain a motion to vote. So is there any discussion on the proposal? Are we ready to make a motion then?
I'll go.
All right.
All right.
Mr. Fell.
I move that we send plan case 2443-SU-22 to the city council with a recommendation of approval.
With the conditions as recommended by the,
Yes.
okay. Sounds good. So we have a motion by Mr. Fell. Is there a second?
Deborah.
We have a second by Ms. McFarland. Any further discussion? All right. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Deb McFarland,
Yes.
Chen-Shi Yu,
Yes.
Dustin Allred,
Yes.
Andrew Fell,
Yes.
and Lou Hopkins.
Yes.
All right. So that passes. Do we have a date for that for council?
I believe that's April 11th as well, right, Kevin?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks again, Mr. Olson. So that brings us to new business. Case number CCZBA 030AT21. This is a request by the Champaign County Zoning Administrator to amend the Champaign County Zoning Ordinance to add data center and PV solar array to the table of authorized principal uses and related changes. Do we have a staff report on this one?
Yes, we do.
All right.
And I'll bring it up. And let's see. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Data center is proposed as a special use in the Ag 2 agriculture, B4 general business, and I4 light industry zoning districts. PV solar array is proposed as a second principal use on a lot with a county board approved special use permit in the Ag 2 agriculture zoning district, or as a principal use with a county board approved special use permit in the Ag 2 agriculture and all business and industrial zoning districts. The proposed text amendment is of interest to the city of Urbana because it may affect zoning and land development decisions within the city's 1.5 mile extraterritorial jurisdiction. Land uses in the county affect the city of Urbana in several ways, including that they can potentially conflict with adjacent land uses in the city. Unincorporated portions of the county adjacent to the city will likely be annexed into the city at some time, and the uses existing on the land would be incorporated as part of that annexation. And development patterns of areas annexed into the city will affect the city's ability to grow according to the shared vision provided in the city's comprehensive plan. Under state law, a municipal protest of the proposed amendment by the corporate authorities would require a 3/4 supermajority of votes to approve the request at the county board. Otherwise, a simple majority would be required. Staff recommends no protest of the proposed text amendment because the proposed text amendment would minimize land use incompatibilities and still allow the city to plan and manage development through the county special use permit review process. Champaign County Department of Planning and Zoning has an applicant interested in establishing a data processing center that includes a 2 megawatt solar array to power the facility. The proposed design differs from the more typical data center design of a business office with a server room, which is already currently allowed in the B2, B4, B5, and I4 zoning districts. A principal use data center would be different and therefore warrants its own land use category and requirements. The solar array in this situation is also different because it is designed to power the on-site data processing center rather than for wholesale energy sales to the utility grid, which is already a allowed use as a solar farm in the Champaign County zoning ordinance. This configuration is similar to the proposed data center with solar array that was approved by the Urbana Zoning Board of Appeals to allow multiple principal structures on a single parcel. The proposed amendment actually uses the same definition of a data center that the city of Urbana used in that case. At its December 9th, 2021 meeting, the Champaign County ELUC reviewed a memorandum regarding a proposed addition of data center and PV solar array land uses. On January 27th of 22, the Champaign County Zoning Board of Appeals opened its public hearing and closed the public hearing at its February 17th meeting. On March 3rd, Zoning Administrator Hall, who is here in attendance tonight, issued supplemental memorandum number 1 with additional special conditions to address concerns regarding interconnections and data center noise. ELUC is scheduled to review the Champaign County ZBA decision at its April 7th meeting and then make a recommendation to the Champaign County Board at its May 5th meeting. The case could be heard by the Champaign County Board at its May 19th, 2022 meeting at its earliest. I will share again my screen. And what you see is the draft amendment as summarized in the legal notice. I've added some bolding and underlining to help you follow along. First of all, a PV, sorry, let's see. There we go. The first item is that they would add in definitions for data center and PV solar array. And then the second item is they would add in a paragraph that authorizes a PV solar array as a county board special use permit as a second principal use on a lot with another principal use. That's the first option of allowing a PV solar array. They would also add data center as a special use in the Ag, B4, and I1 zoning districts, and add PV solar array as a county board special use permit in the Ag 2 and all business and industrial zoning districts. That's a second way that a PV solar array could be permitted. And then adding a footnote to the table of principal uses with some language about how PV solar arrays would be classified. Those that are 1 megawatt or more, which is I think roughly 3 or 4 acres worth of solar panels, as a county board special use permit, and PV solar arrays that are smaller than that in design size as an accessory PV solar array. The fifth item is they would add in standard conditions. These are conditions to help regulate these, and they're administratively reviewed and made sure that they're being followed. The location of the data center needs to be improved in writing by the relevant fire protection district. The applicant would provide an explanation of security features for the data center, Data centers with solar arrays would be located adjacent to the solar inverter and as far as possible from property lines and adjacent dwellings. And then they would add in a new section 7.9 that defines accessory PV solar arrays. And so accessory PV solar arrays are those less than 1 megawatt, as previously stated. They would be basically treated as an accessory structure and comply with the minimum zoning requirements that other accessory structures need to meet for required yards, so keeping them away from property lines. If there is an accessory ground-mounted PV solar array greater than 1,000 square feet in area, screening requirements shall apply. These are screening requirements that are already there in the zoning ordinance. For other uses, they're simply applying those same standards to a large aerial solar array. The third item is important because it basically exempts all roof-mounted solar PV arrays from additional regulation. Something that Plan Commission talked about for the city's proposed solar text amendment. And finally, no parking spaces or loading spaces would be required for accessory ground-mounted PV solar arrays. The supplemental memo added some changes. An additional standard condition was added to address concerns about interconnection agreements, making sure that they apply to the relevant utility before or while the application has already been submitted to the county. And the eighth item is that a fourth standard condition would be added for the data centers to address concerns about data center generated noise, basically referring to existing regulation by the Illinois Pollution Control Board that is on the books already, so that any applicant located within 1,500 feet of a dwelling shall submit a noise analysis by a qualified professional that demonstrates compliance with the IPCB's noise regulations. And then enforcement shall follow protocols established in the zoning ordinance, Champaign County zoning ordinance. Okay. So the proposed amendments benefits to the county are that it would allow two uses that are currently not listed as possible principal uses, data centers and PV solar arrays. Any data centers would be permitted. Let's go ahead and reshare the screen. I think this is easier to understand when you look at a table. So here is a summary of how data centers and PV solar arrays, where they would be allowed. Data center would be, and then also comparing them to how the city regulates them. County would allow a data center as a special use in the Ag 2, B4, and I1 zoning districts. The city does not have data center as an explicit specific use in the table of uses. So the zoning administrator has found that the most similar use is an electrical substation. Electrical substations are a permitted use in these zoning districts that you see on the table. It's also allowed as a conditional use or as a special use. In all, it's allowed in 15 different zoning districts with various levels of review. This is compared to only being allowed as a special use in 3 zoning districts. So I would summarize or categorize that as saying the county is allowing them in fewer districts with a higher level of review. PV solar arrays, they are currently in the city Principal use PV solar arrays are treated as an electrical substation, allowed in those zoning districts that you see in the table above for electrical substations. PV arrays supplying a specific use are treated as a mechanical, not as an accessory structure. Mechanicals are allowed in any zoning district. Residential mechanicals are not required to be screened. Non-residential ground-mounted mechanicals are required to be screened. In the proposed zoning text amendment, the three ways that solar arrays are permitted are either as a second principal use, or as its own single principal use, or as an accessory structure. I lay out there for you the zoning districts that they are allowed in. Similar to data centers, it is apparent that the county is allowing solar arrays in fewer districts with higher levels of review, only allowing them as county board approved special uses, except for any accessory structure solar arrays. Whereas the city allows them in, I think it's 13 different zoning districts, anywhere from permitted use, conditional, or special use. We treat the accessory structures a little closer. We don't treat them as accessory structures in the city. We treat them as mechanicals. And then finally, PV solar farms aren't addressed in this proposed text amendment at all, but as you'll see from the following flow chart, they come into how one defines what a proposed item is. So maybe we'll just go to that. This is a flow chart that I put together trying to represent how the county figures out what kind of installation they're looking at. You start off in the upper left-hand corner. You first ask, who is the intended consumer of electricity? If it's for wholesale power sale to the power grid, it's determined that it's a PV solar farm, and you're regulated under the existing section 615. If it's for on-site power use, then your second question you ask is, how is it mounted? If it's a roof-mounted solar array, it's exempt. If it's ground-mounted solar array, the third question you ask is, how big is it? If it's less than 1 megawatt, it's treated as a PV solar array and regulated under the proposed section 7.9. If it's larger than 1 megawatt in size, it's treated as a PV solar array, but it has to meet the higher standards of the PV solar farm requirements that are already in the county's zoning ordinance. The second system size question that is asked is about how large it is square footage wise. If it's less than 1,000 square feet, there's no screening required. If it's more than 1,000 square feet, screening is required. That would be for whether it was an accessory, a principal, or a second principal use. Moving down to the categorical use question, if it's an accessory structure PV solar array, it follows the proposed new section 5.2 footnote 31. If it's a principal use PV solar array, it follows section 5.2. And if it's a second principal use solar array on a lot with another use, then it would follow section 421C6. So it's very complicated, but it feels less complicated to me when you can follow a flow chart. Okay, going back to where we were at the memo. The Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan was adopted by the county board on April 22nd of 2010 and is currently the only guidance for amendments to the Champaign County zoning ordinance. Champaign County planning and zoning staff noted in the finding of fact that the proposed text amendment will not impede achievement of goals 1, 2, and 9, and that it will help achieve goals 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. The proposed text amendment itself will improve the zoning ordinance because it will help achieve the majority of the purposes of the ordinance. It will also improve the text of the ordinance because it will provide a classification which allows data centers and PV solar arrays to be developed while establishing minimum requirements and provide a means to regulate an activity for which there is demonstrated demand. The staff report goes into the intent of the county's ag, business, and zoning districts. I provided the zoning description sheets in the exhibits. County land within the city's ETJ is dominated by agriculture, over 81%, mostly Ag 2, with small areas zoned residential, conservation, and with little business or industrial. I'm going to reshare the screen and we'll let you look. So Exhibit C shows those areas where data centers would be permitted as a special use. Ag 2 is all of the green areas. B4, which is basically the city's general business designation. B3, it's County B4. Those are the blue areas. That's primarily along Cunningham Avenue. And I4 industrial, that's in the northwest section around the city, which is primarily zoned industrial land as well. For Exhibit D, proposed PV solar array districts, this expands the number of zoning districts, but does not significantly expand the amount of acreage. It's all of the Ag 2, any of the B business districts, and either of the 2 industrial districts. You can see that this is, the north end of the county, of the city, outside the city. This is mostly the city's industrial corridor up here. There are some infill areas in the city closer to the corporate limits. Even though an application could be submitted for those there, they would still be special use permits subject to review by county board. Special use permits are also sent to the city to provide comments on. The city would provide comments on that, send them back to the county, and presumably the county would take those comments into consideration. At that time, we would then look at the specific proposal, what it is adjacent to, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, and go on a case-by-case analysis for that particular proposal. Stepping back to city zoning, city staff reviewed the proposed text amendment to identify potential land conflicts and finds that the proposed amendment would minimize land use incompatibilities and still allow the city to plan and manage development through the county special use permit process. The city does not specifically list data centers or PV solar arrays as principal uses. City staff are working on a zoning text amendment to add PV solar arrays to the table of uses. The Urbana zoning administrator has determined that the most similar use to a data center is an electrical substation. We reviewed those districts that they're allowed in. In summary, currently the city permits data centers in many more zoning districts, 15, with lower levels of permitting and fewer specific conditions than the county's proposed amendment would allow in 3 zoning districts. Admittedly, the Ag 2 zoning district is a very large zoning district. So currently the city permits large-scale PV solar arrays in more zoning districts with lower level of permitting and fewer conditions than the county's proposed amendment would allow. Only 2 districts. Discussions between staff and the Urbana Plan Commission around the proposed city zoning text amendments, which would allow PV solar energy systems, have addressed some items similarly to the proposed planning amendment. PV solar arrays mounted on roofs would be exempt from regulation. PV solar arrays primarily intended to sell electricity to the grid would be a principal use and treated as a PV solar farm with stricter review. PV solar arrays powering a specific use would likely be treated as an accessory structure. And small-scale PV solar arrays, including small accessory structure PV solar arrays, would likely be exempt from landscaping and screening requirements. The city's ability to comment on and protest against the proposed zoning amendment is only the first important check and balance of the county's ability to approve land use through zoning in land that is likely to be annexed into the city in the future. The city has a second valuable tool to influence future land in the ETJ. The city is authorized to review and comment on any proposed special use permits in its ETJ, including those for any future data centers or PV solar arrays, or for PV solar farms for that matter. If a data center or PV solar array were permitted under the proposed amendment, it must still comply with the detailed specific conditions in the amendment, including fire protection district approval, security features, noise minimization, design, minimum yards, and noise levels. As such, staff believes that the proposed amendment would minimize land use incompatibilities and still allow the city to plan and manage development through the county's special use permit review process. By state law, the city has the ability to review zoning decisions for consistency with the city's comprehensive plan. Staff reviewed that and found several goals and objectives, which are listed in the staff report, and found that the proposed county zoning text amendment is generally consistent with these city goals and objectives, encouraging a variety of land uses while minimizing the effects of potentially incompatible land uses through design controls and maximizing the use of existing utility infrastructure. The staff findings are summarized in the staff report. I will share the screen again, and we can share with you the options. The Plan Commission has the following options in CCZBA case 030 AT21. Forward the plan case to the City Council with a recommendation to protest the proposed amendment, or to protest the proposed amendment contingent upon specific provisions to be identified, or to forward the plan case to the City Council with a recommendation not to protest the proposed amendment. Staff recommends that Plan Commission forward the case to City Council with a recommendation not to protest the proposed amendment. That is the end of my staff report. I'm happy to answer questions or try and clarify things. Champaign County Department of Planning and Zoning Director John Hall is in attendance tonight also to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ricci. That's a confusing one with a lot going on, but I think you did a good job trying to simplify and clarify that. Any questions for staff, for Mr. Ricci or Mr. Hall? Mr. Hopkins?
A couple of questions. Simplest one first. You mentioned that county special use permits get staff commentary, but they don't come to the City Planning Commission. Am I correct?
That's actually a very good question. I haven't ever had one come in. I don't know if it comes to Plan Commission or if it gets reviewed by staff. Kevin, do you have any ideas?
I believe they do come to Plan Commission, but we'll go on with other questions. I'll see if I can look that up while
Okay.
while the others are
It's
going on.
not crucial. I sort of vaguely remember that maybe they do, but
I'm pretty sure they do.
suggested they don't.
Yeah.
But no, so a slightly more complicated question. The Illinois Pollution Control Board noise regulations. The noise regulations that would, this is a question, but I can, it's too complicated other than to make us as a statement. The Pollution Control Board noise regulations specify decibel levels, maybe times of day, at given distances from the facility, independent of the surrounding land uses. Yes? No?
I'm not sure what you mean by independent of the land uses, but from what I remember from the matrix that I read, they look at sending land uses and receiving land uses. It's kind of like our buffer yard requirements in the zoning ordinance, where the standards go up the further apart the types of uses are.
So the answer then is no. It does depend on the surrounding land uses.
Yes.
And okay, so now going one step further, as I understand it, in the county, I realize we're talking the county now, but I'll come back to the city. The requirement that an engineer confirm the analysis comes into play only if there's a residence within 1,500 feet.
Correct.
But the noise regulations apply regardless. But maybe there's a correlation between that 1,500 to a residential use and the requirement for an engineering analysis. I don't know, because I don't know how that works. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to get quick answers to this, and maybe I can leave it until we get to discussion. But I think there are issues here.
Right. If I can,
about the development pattern of the edge of the city and the city's ordinance, which I think is problematic. That's the city's problem, not the county's problem.
Right. I think what the proposed amendment says is any noise levels from any data center have to comply with the Illinois Pollution Control Board's noise regulations. If it's close enough within 1,500 feet of a dwelling, then they're going to proactively require that a noise analysis be submitted with the application. If
Right.
you're further than that, or you're close to something that's not a dwelling, they're not going to make you submit a noise analysis, but if they get a complaint, they'll follow up on it and enforce it if necessary.
Right, and that's exactly the way I read it at the moment, yes. And okay.
Lou, to answer your first question, in the zoning ordinance section 11-2, the plan commission section, under powers and duties, it says plan commission has the power to review zoning and special use cases before the Champaign County Zoning Board. So yes, plan commission would get to weigh in.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? I had a question about the determination that the data center is similar to the electrical substation in terms of how the city views that. In what way was it determined to be similar? Is it a question of aesthetics or a question of size and scale? Or I'm just curious how you decided that.
It's a question of when something is proposed that isn't in our table of uses, we have to pick the most similar use. So this came about when there was a solar array proposed for the on the old landfill, the landscape recycling area. And so we basically just had to look at our table of uses and pick what best fit it. I don't think it's a great fit, but when your choice is best available, an electrical substation deals with electricity and transmitting it out to the grid, or taking it in and transmitting it out. So very loosely related, probably, but best available. So that is why we're working on our own solar text amendment to firm things up.
Okay, so that's what I thought. It was more about function. Mr. Hopkins?
Got another question again. So my read, and maybe I've misread this, is that you have also identified an electrical substation as the conversion of a data center.
Yeah, that was my question, actually, not the arrays.
It's not the, right, okay. So this is what I wanted to come back to with the city later. It's the conversion of a data center to an electric substation that I think is extremely problematic, and I think we have to deal with. But that's not a question.
Yeah, and I think I think this county text amendment has led us to think that we probably need to address data centers as well sometime in the near future. So for that, sorry, Dustin, I didn't even hear that part of your question.
Okay.
It's electrons in and electrons out.
I understand that you got to pick something. I'm just identifying that even for the discussion in a few minutes, I think the city has to deal with its end of that, and that's a little bit separate from this case.
Yep, agreed.
Any other questions for staff? Anyone in the audience want to address the commission about this? I don't think we've had any change in our attendance. All right, seeing no questions and no one wanting to make a comment, let's go into discussion and possibly entertain a motion to vote. So is there any discussion on the proposal? Mr. Hopkins.
Okay, so now that we're in discussion, by happenstance, data centers and noise have been in the mainstream press recently, as some of you who read the same things I do may have noticed. Noise is a huge problem. Given that this is an ETJ issue, extraterritorial jurisdiction, how the noise regulations are applied relative to existing adjacent land uses, like distance to residential, can end up being problematic over time in the development at the edges of cities, because the nearest residential to a data center is likely to come after the data center is built and meets the noise requirements, not when it is built. And especially because a major difference between a data center of this kind and an electrical substation is an electrical substation doesn't have huge cooling fans and compressors trying to keep it cool. That is, it's not noisy. It may be ugly, but it's not noisy. And so I think that the county ordinance looks pretty good in this respect. I wish I knew a little bit more precisely how the noise regulations of the Pollution Control Board actually work and what those dimensions and use relationships in that matrix are and how they might relate to where a data center might be located in the county and which neighborhoods in Urbana might get the noise. Because I can guess which neighborhoods it might be and which neighborhoods it might not. So flipping back to my other question is, we as a commission at least get to review a special use permit. And I think as I read this ordinance, no data center can occur without a special use permit. Okay, so it seems to me that we can recommend not to protest this ordinance, thank the county for doing this work, clarify the noise pollution control board standards matrix, and get right on defining data centers in the city of Urbana, so that when the first special use permit comes from the county to the Plan Commission, we can have the backing of our own ordinance to say that may be 50 and 100 feet away from the current residence, but our comp plan and our ordinance would not permit that in a plausible future, and we're going to protest. So with that logic and sort of work plan, I would process this without, to not protest.
Any other discussion, comments? I think I'm in agreement with Mr. Hopkins. What raised issues for me was the presence of the table in the comparison of data centers to substations from the city's perspective. I think it's knowing that there are significant issues about noise in data centers versus substations. I don't think we want to be making that argument in terms of sort of rationalizing the impact or lack of impact for something like this. But in terms of the county's ordinance, I don't see a problem with what they're trying to do. Any other comments, discussion? Are we ready to make a motion?
All right, I don't have it in front of me. What's the?
CCZBA 030 AT21.
Okay, I move we send that case to the city council with a recommendation to not protest.
All right, so we got a motion by Mr. Hopkins. We have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fell. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, I'll handle roll for Marcus's case since he was so kind in doing the earlier rolls. Okay, let's start on Ms. McFarland.
No.
Mr. Fell.
That was a no meaning we should protest?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Fell, you are muted.
Oh, this isn't when we vote backwards, correct?
We used to vote backwards. We simplified it, and now we just say either you vote to protest or you vote to not protest. So this time the motion was to not protest. So
Okay. Yes.
okay. All right, Ms. Yu. Sorry, I didn't catch that, Chenshi. I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. All right, Mr. Hopkins
Yes.
and Mr. Allred.
Yes. Okay, so that passes.
Okay, also City Council on April 11th.
All right. That brings us to audience participation. Is there anyone who wishes to address the Plan Commission for 4 minutes uninterrupted on a topic of your choice? If so, could you please raise your hand in the attendee room? All right, looks like we have no audience participation. Brings us to staff report. Do we have a staff report?
No staff report, but I did want to make some sort of announcements. So I guess this is a good time to bring those up. First of all, next month we will be resuming in-person meetings. So I look forward to seeing you all in person again. And then, hopefully this time it's not just a brief blip and then we have to return to these Zoom meetings again. So we'll be sure that everybody is very clear that the next meeting is in person. I also wanted to mention why we were continuing the R7 or the Greek House text amendment case to next time. We inadvertently scheduled our neighborhood meeting during spring break. So we decided to push that back to March 29th so that we could get more attendees. That also gave us some time and I'm going to share this so everybody has the info in front of them. It gave us some time to put out a survey. So if you go to the survey website here or hold your phone up and scan the QR code, you can take the survey about that text amendment. Obviously, Plan Commission should probably not take the survey, just the people watching at home, since this will be coming to Plan Commission. But just wanted you all to be aware of that. And then that next meeting is, it's going to be virtual still. It's this coming Tuesday, the 29th at 7 p.m. So once we get through that meeting, we'll hopefully be ready to bring something back to Plan Commission at the following meeting. And then keep that case rolling. So we're excited about it. I think a lot of people are excited about it. So we've been getting some great survey results. Last I saw, we had 77 people respond, which I think is pretty nice. We sent out just shy of 650 postcards to people who live near R7 properties just last week. So we're excited about that. And I think that concludes my staff reports.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Garcia? And that survey link can be found on the website at that address that you had up there.
Yeah. Yeah, let me take a look at that again. It's on that urbanaillinois.us/R7 update. Also, we've got on the main Urbana page, it's one of the featured stories at the bottom. So
Okay,
trying to push that out to as many people as we can.
sounds good. Do we have a study session?
Nope.
And our closed session may actually happen
Next time.
the 7th? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll have to dust off that PowerPoint. Hopefully it's compatible with whatever version we're running now.
Yeah. All right. With that, we are adjourned.
Okay, at 8:33 p.m. Everybody
Thanks,
have a
everyone.
great night.